Bismillah wa alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Alhamdulillah, it's with great pleasure that I stand up here today, and it's a great opportunity that we have in Sydney. We have access to mashayikh and to industry subject matter experts that work on the ground level, that work on the grassroots level with the issues that we've got inside the community. So alhamdulillah, as you have heard, the talk today, inshallah, the panel will be about parenting and how you deal with your children. So alhamdulillah, this should be beneficial for the youth, inshallah, and also to the parents and anyone planning to have children, bismillah. I'll introduce the mashayikh very briefly, then I'll hand it over to them so they can give the introductions. But alhamdulillah, we've got Sheikh Aref, Sheikh Shady Sh Aref, and also brother Danny Miqati. So we both know these mashayikh. We've got Sheikh Aref, alhamdulillah. He's very focused on the academic side, and really when you want to get into the nitty-gritty of a question and you want to know the details, Sheikh Aref is someone who I love to turn to because he gives me the answer that's specific to myself. You've got Sheikh Shady, alhamdulillah. You know, I don't want to get into his full resume because I'll be up here too long. But the thing that is specific to tonight is that Sheikh Shady is truly in the trenches with the youth. So when it comes to children, when it comes to the youth, when it comes to young adults, he has got his hands dirty, if you like, working with them. We've got brother Danny Miqati. It was a pleasure for me to meet recently. But this brother has been a serving police officer for 15 years. He also was a specialist for child abuse and domestic violence for 7 years. So alhamdulillah, in terms of dealing with the community and being a voice between the community and the law enforcement, if you like, alhamdulillah, the brother has got the right expertise and the right skill set for the type of questions that we'll be asking today, inshallah. With that, I'll hand it over to the mashayikh so they can give the introduction, starting with Sheikh Aref, inshallah.
Introduction on the topic. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى كل ما استنى بسنته واهتدى بهديه ليوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا ثم أما بعد. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا واجعلنا في طلب العلم لك من المخلصين وتقبله منا واجعله في ميزان حسناتنا إنك أنت البر الجواد الكريم. اللهم إنا نبرأ من حولنا وقوتنا ونلجأ إلى حولك وقوتك فعنا على ما كلفتنا به وقدمتنا إليه إنك أنت القدير إنك أنت ميسر كل أمر عسير ثم أما بعد. Of course, firstly, would like to thank and express gratitude to the UMA, to the subcommittees, all the individuals and the brothers and the sisters that have made this event possible. And we also thank the committee of Lakima Mosque for facilitating for this particular event. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from all of us. And it is surely a privilege to sit by the side of Sheikh Shady. Sheikh Shady, he is underestimated, but he's one of the prominent du'at, locally, nationally, internationally. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve him and benefit the ummah with his knowledge and expertise. And similarly, it's a privilege to sit next to Brother Danny. He's not retired yet, but I'd like to call him a young veteran because, mashallah, he has really contributed to the community beyond what his occupation requires him to provide. And he has showed a lot of care. He does a lot of work that is behind the veils. The community does not know, but he's someone that really cares for the benefit and the well-being of this community. And therefore, it is really a great honor to sit and to work with the Sheikh and with Brother Danny on this important issue. One vivid image that flows up in my mind every time I read specific ayat, flashes before my eyes, is the image of Zakaria alayhi salam, Nabiullah Zakaria. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about some of the moments of his life, when he was invoking Allah subhanahu, requesting from him a wish that he has always wanted for a long time. ذكر رحمة ربك عبده زكريا إذ نادى ربه نداء خفيا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Maryam speaks to us. Remind you of the mercy of Allah upon his slave Zakaria when he called upon his Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala and supplicated in secret. What did he ask for? إذ نادى ربه نداء خفيا قال ربي إني وهن العظم مني واشتعل الرأس شيبا ولم أكن بدعائك ربي شقيا. Oh my Lord, my bones have become feeble and the grey hair has raided and spread in my head, and I never asked you for something and you held it back from me. What was he asking for? He was asking for a child. قال ربي إني وهن العظم مني واشتعل الرأس شيبا ولم أكن بدعائك ربي شقيا وإني خفت الموالي من ورائي وكانت امرأتي عاقرا فهب لي من لدنك وليا. I fear my relatives for my wife. My wife is barren, so provide to me a child. So we can see that Zakaria at the age of 120 years old, the ulama of history they say, and his wife was around 98 years old, was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for one bounty and one wish. And this wish was the wish of a child. A prophet of Allah that has dedicated his entire life and lived in poverty and dedication to the religion of Allah and his mission, he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for one wish. And that wish is what? A child. And then if we move from him and we go to Ibrahim alayhi salam, we find a similar trend, a similar supplication, a similar request, and a similar wish. Rabbi habli min as-salihin. Oh Allah, provide to me an offspring that is from the pious. From the pious. Then and Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he got his children, he was 86 when Allah blessed him with Ismail, 86. And he was 99 when Allah blessed him with Ishaq, alayhim salam ajma'in. Then the question that arises, why did this prophet, why did this messenger ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a child? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to give every servant from us, He said to you, ask me for one thing, other than Jannah, and I will grant it to you. What would you ask for? Would you ask for a child? And that shows, and that's my main point, that shows that the bounty of offspring and having children is one of the great bounties that are not limited to the dunya and are not restricted to those who are materialistic. Otherwise, prophets and messengers will not ask for children. Because prophets and messengers are people that have dedicated their life for the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they all lived a life of poverty. So for tens of years, after tens of years for Zakaria to ask Allah for a child, and after tens of years for Ibrahim to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a child, for him and his wife, that shows that this bounty is a bounty that relates to the dunya and relates to the akhirah. And it is a bounty that relates to the nature of the human as a creature, and relates to what completes us as humans. And that's why the happiness of Ibrahim alayhi salam and the happiness of Zakaria alayhi salam was completed when they had their offspring and they had their children. Therefore, I know my time is limited. Therefore, my brothers and my sisters, the bounty of a child that many or the overwhelming majority of us that we enjoy is one of the great bounties that Allah has given to people. Second to Islam. And that's why prophets and messengers, a noble prophet and a great messenger, asked for them. And with great bounties, how do we treat them? We should cherish them, we should protect them, and we should keep them, and we should thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for these bounties that He has given to us. And therefore the bounty of a child and being a parent is one of the greatest bounties that Allah has given you. And that's the first way that I would like to define parenting. Give me my time, so I didn't go before. And that will be the first time, or the first definition of parenting. It is one of the greatest bounties upon you. At the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He speaks about the concept of parenting in the Quran, He defines it from another perspectives. And the other perspective is that it is a bounty that is combined with a great obligation. يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة عليها ملائكة غلاظ شداد لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. O you who believe, protect your children, yourselves and your children, from what? From a hellfire which is fueled with humans and stones. The caretakers, those who are responsible for it, are strong, severe angels that will never disobey what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask them to do, and indeed they will follow it through. And this ayah in Surah Al-Tahrim is also great, because if you look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about this concept, you find that He combines the concept of protection and the concept of parenting and the concept of hellfire. And that's why any human on the face of the earth, from any culture, from any norm, from any civilization that they come from, under any legal system that they follow, if you ask them, is it the responsibility and the obligation of a parent to protect their children from fire or from danger? What would they say? What would they say? Yes. Yes. And for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it clear in the minds of those who are in the Quran, He says, as this is a universal fact that all the world concedes on it, then know that the protection of your children from the hellfire is exactly, should be a fact that all the world will have to concede on. As you protect them from a small danger, then how about protecting them from an eternal danger, which is the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the loss of a child is one of the great calamities that someone can encounter. That's why the reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has associated with the endurance of losing a child is great. I'm not going to mention it because probably will get too long. And therefore, even in the European, even in non-Muslim culture, one of the most tragic events that can happen to a person is for them to lose a child, for them to witness the death of the child before their eyes. And that is something that is very agonizing for the people. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran speaks to us about a greater loss, a one that you can call the ultimate loss. إِنَّ الْخَاسِرِينَ الَّذِينَ خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَهْلِيهِمْ. Verily the true losers are those who lose themselves and they lose their offspring. When? On the Day of Judgment. Therefore, parenting is the greatest bounty that Allah, or one of the greatest bounties that Allah has given to us. Parenting is an obligation that Allah will ask us about, like He will ask us about our acts of worship. Parenting and failing in parenting can lead to a devastating loss. And that's why we're here tonight, because we don't want to experience any type of loss, be it small or be it big, in relation to our children. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve the family and the offspring of the Muslimin and our offspring as well. And inshallah, I'll leave the opportunity to Sheikh Shady and Brother Danny.
Sheikh Aref, thank you for that introduction. Inshallah, quick words from Sheikh Shady.
You want to make the introduction for papers?
Oh yeah, sorry brothers and sisters. If you want to ask a question tonight, Bismillah, the brothers are going to be passing around papers. So if you want to put your hand up now, they'll pass around a few pieces of paper. You write a question, hand it back to the brothers, Bismillah, and we'll get them a share to get through as much as they can as possible. Sorry? Oh, we're taking questions on Facebook as well. Okay, for those that, I'm guessing it's live. Alright, the people that are here tonight, tuning in live, you can get your questions on Facebook as well, inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bestow a great blessing upon you, and that's your children. As Sheikh Aref mentioned earlier, the children are a great ni'mah, a great grace and blessing from Allah. A great gift, a great bounty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can grant you. A gift that's worth everything of this world. It's so valuable that nothing of this world can equal to it. But at the same time, this ni'mah, this bounty can become a great test in your life if it's not dealt with correctly. And that's why your children either will be those who make dua for you, or maybe those who make dua upon you. For that, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, يَنْقَطِعُ عَامِلُ ابْنَ آدَمْ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ. That after your death, you will no longer receive rewards only from 3 good actions. From amongst those 3 good actions that you'll continue reaping the rewards and harvesting the rewards even after your death, وَوَلَدٌ صَالِحٌ يَدْعُ لَهُ, a righteous son that will continue making dua for you. Your righteous son, that you upbring and you raise correctly according to the way of Allah Azza wa Jal, and you upbring them in an Islamic environment and bring righteousness and piety in their life, that they continue making dua after you, say, Rabbi irhamhuma kama rabbayani saghira, oh Allah, have mercy upon them the way they had mercy upon me when I was young. It's even mentioned in the hereafter, a man, a father or a mother will stand before Allah, and Allah Azza wa Jal will show them their books, and they'll see in those books so much hajj, so many donations being donated, mosques being built, thousands of people who came to Islam. You know yourself, this man will say, Ya Allah, I didn't do all this, maybe it's the wrong book. So Allah will say to him, but this is one of your children, one of your offsprings. One of your children, one of your offsprings who did that, and you got the same rewards as them because you were the reason that brought them to, or made them to do that. My brothers and my sisters, wallahi, the greatest investment that you could invest in this world, not the houses that you build or the businesses that you achieve, but the best business that you could build in this world is to have righteous children, righteous daughter and son, that they pray when Allah commands them to pray, they keep away from the haram, they do what's right, and they remember you when they see the goodness in their life. So inshallah, we want to aim to achieve that, to have the best of children. We want our children to make dua for us, not on us. We want our children to remember the goodness that we entrenched, or the goodness that we instilled in their lives. That when they pray, they remember they prayed because we taught them how to pray. And when they fast, they remember that we taught them how to fast. They remember the good things that we taught them. These days you might come across brothers and sisters that say, my parents never ever done good to me. My parents never taught me how to read. My parents never taught me how to read the Quran, how to pray, never done anything good to me. Or good with regards of Islam. And just reminds me of a quick story of Umar ibn Khattab, when a man came dragging his son to him, and he said to him, oh Umar, this is my son, he is disobedient to me. So strike him, hit him, punish him, teach him a good lesson. So this young child, before Umar ibn Khattab, reacted to hit him, he said to him, oh Umar, what are the rights of the children upon their parents? So Umar ibn Khattab said, the rights of the children upon their parents, that the parents must give them a good name, teach them the Quran, and choose a good mother for them. So this child, he says, well, my father chose a woman that does not even belong to the nation of Islam. My father chose a woman, another narration says she was a prostitute. My father chose my mother to be my mother who is a non-Muslim, or at the same time she was a wicked woman. My father never taught me the Quran, and my father named me Ju'la. Ju'la means a little cockroach, a little insect. You know? So Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said the beautiful word, and please remember those words, عَقَقْتُمْ أَبْنَاءَكُمْ قَبْلَ أَن تَعُقُكُمْ أَبْنَاءُكُمْ. You disobeyed your children and neglected their rights before they disobeyed you and neglected your rights. It all begins, ikhwani, before even you find that mother for your children. And inshallah, this is something we want to learn about. I'll leave the rest, inshallah, for Brother Danny to give us more an insight of his experience as someone who stays awake the night, chasing behind our children.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I told you he doesn't need a microphone, I told you just to leave it here. First of all, I'm extremely honoured to be on this panel. I should be sitting right at the back over there instead of sitting up here. But I'll do my best, inshallah. To tie in what Sheikh Aref and Sheikh Shady were saying reminds me of a certain day where I was at work a number of years ago. And one of the worst duties you can ask a police officer to do is deliver what we call a death message. Whenever someone passes away, it's a police officer's role to go and tell the family, the next of kin, and identify the body. Being one of the first Muslim officers in Bankstown, I did that a lot. And probably for the first 6 or 7 years, no one did as much as I did with the Muslim community, going as far out as Liverpool or Campbelltown or whatever. One shift I was working and there was a call for someone not breathing, and they said it was a 2-year-old. So it was actually in Greenacre. So I rushed to the house. I was there first, and the toddler had fallen to the backyard pool and was not breathing. So I jumped in and we started doing mouth to mouth and doing what we could, but unfortunately that child's time was up and nothing we could do could bring the child back. The father wasn't at home at the time, the mother wasn't at home at the time, and it was with one of the sisters. And she had passed out, so we were working on the sister to bring her back, and she woke up. How am I going to tell my mum? How am I going to tell my dad? So I just pretty much carried her most of the time. She was only about 9 years old at the time. Her mother had gone next door neighbour to pick up some leaves, wara'anib, and bring it back. In those few minutes, it was the most critical time, and that was the time for her to go. So the biggest job for me now was to go tell the mother what had happened. That was extremely grueling, and what was worse was the father coming home, having no idea, just seeing a police car, what's happened. And then I had to do that. I spent 10 hours with that family that day, doing what we can, organising burial practices, fighting with doctors over no autopsy, and this is the rules of Australia and all this kind of stuff. I had 1 hour left in my shift, and a person had called the station saying they've got a problem with their son, please come now. It was up the road in the same street, subhanAllah. I went to that house and there was a father who was talking to me behind the phone, saying, behind the door, he goes, please just come in. The door's locked, he goes, kick it in. All right, so I kicked it in. He'd been locked in the closet of his house, and his 14-year-old son had taken a hammer and just smashed every wall in the house and was just going nuts. Because the dad wouldn't give him the car keys and drive. He's 14, he shouldn't be driving, and the father said no. So he started smashing the whole house. The father got scared, locked himself. The father was a very small man, the 14-year-old's a very large man. And I grabbed him and restrained him, took the hammer off him and put him in the back of the paddy wagon. Went back to the father and he goes to me, I wish he was dead. And I said to him, no, you don't. If you could see what I see, you'd understand. We have very interesting times these days, brothers and sisters. We're at a time where we throw words where we're not big enough for. It's not just the street kids now, it's our parents as well. We've come to an age where the father will come to me when his son's 16, 17. Brother, he's dealing, he's doing this, he's doing that. What do I do? Please, I'll kiss your feet. What do I do? What do I do? After sitting and talking with this father, you get the same answers every time. I ask him, when he was in year 5, who was his best friend? I don't know. When he was in year 6, what was his favourite sport? I don't know. Who took him to soccer practice? His mum. Who took him to tutoring? His mum. Who took him over? His mum. Eid, his mum. Where were you, Habibi? Where were you? You want to raise him at 16? You have to raise him when he was born. And we're at an age now where we like to point fingers. Everyone else is to blame but us, the government, the police, whatever. There's going to come a time when you're going to be asked about your children and it won't be us asking you. And so at the end of the day, we're hoping with things like this, subhanAllah, this year my focus was parents. We're coming to a time where are we going to be happy with the answers we can give? So what I ask, especially the fathers in the room, or the fathers to be, when your son can read, when your son is ready to start playing with his friends and going out, you need to know not 1, not 2, at least 3 of his close friends, first name, last name, the address, the phone number, know who that family is. Because you know what you're going to do later on? You're going to say, it wasn't my fault, the street raised him. No child is born on the street. You've got all those formative years to dwell with him. Not to spend 14 hours at Sahara Cafe drinking coffee. Not to spend your life at Argile and then the football and then mum does everything. Mum is coach, tutor, mother, father, brother, sister. That's not fair on our sisters. And that's not the role of the mother. And this is the problem. And some of these mothers do absolutely amazing jobs, taking over for what their husbands should be doing. There is
But he says they are fitna, how can they be both? That's because that this is an ayah that is misquoted. I think that's from Surah Al-Taghabun, Allahu A'lam, the one that speaks about the fitna. And when the children are described a fitna, that was in the context of the verses where people were using their wealth and their children as an excuse for them not to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not to do the duty towards their religion. In that particular context, their children and their wealth have become what? They have become a fitna for them. But this does not talk about the general definition of a child or the status of a child in Islam, whether in the Quran or in the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So therefore the verses, but what happened is that the parents, may Allah guide them, they quote them to you. Now, verily Allah have said, إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ fitna. And another one is that they are actually عَدُوٌ لَكُمْ فَاحْذَرُوا. They are enemies of you. So, and they quote these verses, and that happens a lot. Not only from parents, from general, a lot of people in the Muslim community, they quote verses without even them understanding what the verses mean. They just take them as they are and quote them, when the verses will be referring to a specific situation. And in here was where they were used as an excuse for people not to fulfill their duties towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu ta'ala a'lam.
The next question is to Sheikh Shady. Sheikh Shady, this question is relating to, should the father be an authority figure or a friend?
Jazakallah khair. I think this is a very good question, and it comes out of experience. And I'm very overwhelmed with what Brother Danny had mentioned. Keep in mind, we went to school together. He never picked on me, I never picked on him anyway. And mashallah, jazakallah khair, very well said, Brother Danny. And this also comes, yes, should the father be a friend figure or authority? Of course, both. The father should show his authority upon his kids, that the children need to know there are limits. And one of the things that the father needs to draw in the household, limits and rules. Things can't be just done whenever you want, eat whenever you want, put your shoes and throw them wherever you want, go out whenever you want. There's rules. Okay? There's rules when you need to study, there's rules when you read the Quran, there's rules when you watch TV, there's rules when you play with the station, there's rules. And you realize that the good children with good upbringing, you find that the parents really put rules and discipline at home. These are rules. But you find that when the father and the mother are just too relaxed about everything, that's when you find the children, they just become too relaxed about everything. The father needs to be an authority figure, that the children need to know that they can't do anything whenever they want, or go wherever they want, or say whatever they want. And at the same time, the father needs to be that friend. He needs to be a friend to his kids. Not just, they feel like the father is just an authority, because the kids need, one thing I've realized, that our children need to speak to someone. And wallahi, my brothers and my sisters, listen to this carefully. Your kids take you as the best role models. Children take mom and dad as the best role models, as the heroes, as the greatest example and figures. But you know what? Kids are not stupid. When they see mom and dad are not good example, that's when they get out of the house and look for another example. And most of the times, their eyes lay down on the wrong example. You, as a mother and a father, you are the best role model to your kids. You are the best example. You are their superhero. If you ask your kids, someone asks the children, who's your best example in the young guys, they all say mom and dad. But when they grow up and see mom and dad are not the best example, they do what they don't say, they say what they don't do, they lie, they deceive, and they swear. These kids are not stupid, they realize, they know, like how many times I experienced that with my kids. Oh, this is wrong. But you know what? Grandpa does it, or uncle does it. Straight away, like to them, seeing the closest ones to them doing something, even if it's wrong, like smoking and that, it's like justification for them, because they take them as a great example. And that's why, why are you swearing? Well, dad does it. Like to him, dad is a perfect figure. Mom is a perfect figure. And that's why it's something makes it so impossible for them to think that mom and dad did something wrong. But then as they grow up and they realize that mom and dad are full of wrongs, they start looking for someone else. And subhanAllah, the father needs to be an authority, and the father needs to be that friend. And I really like what Brother Danny mentioned. Like, he asked them who's their friends, where they go, where they come. They've got no idea. Wallahi, once one thing really hit me once, and I just, a lot of people that have problems with the youth, especially once they reach age 16, 17, and they start seeing the menace side of their children. Once a father comes up to me, tells me, Wallah, my son, Jannanni ghayyar al-alba, all this haki. And I need other people told me they could help. I said, okay, no problem. I wanted to test him. I told him, we've got Mondays and Thursdays, and I've got Friday nights, 3 programs for your son. Every second day, he could attend. He said, Wallah, that's good. But can you get someone to pick him up? I said, MashaAllah. You want me to arrange someone to pick him up? So I asked him that question. I told him, why don't you bring him? He said, Wallah, I'm too busy working. What? I'll put my work aside and every single dollar I've got on the side, and I look after my children. I don't care about work, I don't care about money, I don't care about my taxi driving. Yes, I'll try and revive my life. I'll go and get a day job. If it's about night job, then I get a day job. But don't come and tell me, Wallahi, I'm too busy working and my son is getting lost. Well, your son is getting lost because of your own hands. This is the stupidity that some people don't even want to take responsibility. And the Prophet ﷺ says, and the father is responsible. He needs to take responsibility. Where's that responsibility? Running away from it? Pick him up? Why should I pick him up? Even if I can pick him up, I don't want to even pick him up. Because you need to take that responsibility. Your son needs to think, your son needs to feel that you are a father that, with some authority and care about him. No wonder why your son came out the way he is. So this is very important, and I ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to make us from amongst those who have the best of parenting. The father should be two, an authority and a friend. An authority that he puts the laws and the discipline down, and a friend that shares with his children and the children share with him.
With all due respect, inshallah, if the speakers can limit the answer to 3 minutes, inshallah. The next question is from Brother Danny Miqati. Even looking at this question, I don't think he can answer it in 3 minutes. The question is, my son is a teenager and extremely rebellious. I need advice on how to handle him. Do I fight fire with fire, or do I let him walk all over me?
Just give me the easy ones, can you? Okay. No worries. Bismillah. Okay. To do this answer justice, there's so much more information I need to know. But to not put the brother on the spot, let's keep it general. The majority of these cases, I need to see who the influence is. If the father is coming to me because the son is rebellious, there's something else there. Something else is taking his attention. There's usually the friends. It could be someone, a relative, but there's some other person around him who he is looking up to, as the Sheikh talked about, who's replaced the father's position as an authority. But there's a flip side to that coin as well. Many times our sons become the fathers. They embody their characters and they become the person that the father was as that child or as he is now. And that's why you clash. All right? It's very interesting when the fathers who lived, especially our generation, our dads, and my dad doesn't watch live streaming, so I'll be safe. Our dads used to do everything. They came to the country like in the 70s, whatever, and yallah, they were going, or they had 5 different girlfriends, and blah, 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 everything was sweet. They would tell you how much of the studs they were, and then all of a sudden they found God because God was missing. And once they've found their religion, they've grown their beard, put it on, and then everything's haram. When their child becomes that person that they were, they're stumped. They're completely stumped. Where'd that come from? I pray, I don't leave the mosque. Maybe because you don't leave the mosque. That could be an issue. If that little seed is in your son, the same seeds you nurtured for the wrong reasons, that was in your son too. Instead of witnessing that side of it and addressing it, you clash. If you're going to clash, nothing's going to work. Discipline at the age of 16, 17 is too late. That's not discipline anymore, that becomes aggression. And that becomes, in Arabic, fashkhala. So you're angry with your child, that's why you scream at him. You scream out of anger, not out of assigning the boundaries. I've got a 9-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl. And they both go to schools in the Bankstown area. And in typical Bankstown fashion, my son pays my 5-year-old daughter protection money. And so she looks after him at school. Now, basically what happens, my daughter has a very strong personality. Hopefully my wife isn't watching this, because I can say it's like my wife. But the personality there, to the point, you know what it's like to the fathers that have those daughters where you're trying to be hard with them, but inside your heart's breaking. You know, like if you find her so cute and so adorable, but you're still trying to be firm so she knows she can't do that. You don't do that with your 16-year-old son. You're not finding him cute. When he's going, come on, Dad. That's not cute, right? So that side of it you lose. And so he becomes out of anger. So the first thing we say as fathers, get out of the house. We kahish. We're very good at that. Eject. Get out. Get out. Get out. Now what do you expect? If your son's got a bit of pride that you might have, he'll get out. I'm not welcome, I'm leaving. Then what happens? Usually with first-time dads, when the son's been gone for 2 hours, 3 hours, he'll pick up the phone and start calling everybody. My son's left the house, I don't know where he is, blah, blah, blah. He'll go to the cousins, to the friends first. Can you tell I've done this before? And they'll start looking the streets trying to find this kid. Last resort is the police. They'll start going to the police. Last resort, because it's a bahadli. We don't want that. We can't admit there's faults in us. That's too late, brothers and sisters. That's just too late. If you're at the stage now, for whatever reason, where there's rebellion why? Is it rebellion because it's just the coming of age? And he's got a personality, you've got a personality, and you're struggling for dominance? We can work through that. Give your son the credit. If he's at that age, talk to him like an adult. You know, whenever you have to say, I'm the father, if you have to say that, there's a problem. I'm your dad. He knows you're his dad. If you're saying it to who? You're saying it to hear it yourself. There's a weakness that you found, so you need to hear that you're his father. Because by the actions, it doesn't look like it. So instead of being raw aggression, this is where you play, pardon the pun, good cop, bad cop with the mum. Your partner in this is extremely important. And how many things we go to mum, we're growing up, don't tell dad, don't tell dad, don't tell dad. What I found out later is that my mum was dogging me. She told dad everything, right? And it was the smartest thing I'd ever learned when I became a parent. First thing I told my wife, if I close the door, you've got to open it. He needs an escape or she needs an escape to go to. If the mother is hearing all the information, the mother tells you without him knowing, and so you're aware of what's going on and you strategize. This is something you would do in your work. Managers take a lot of effort in how they're going to strategize their staff. We can't do that for our kids. So it's really important to that brother that's asking, you need to start playing the good cop, bad cop with the mother. Let the mother know as much as possible, and you assign the boundaries, but with explanations. And there was like, the advice, even in the advice, and I'm not a sheikh, but the advice from Luqman is amazing. The advice, the way the people of eminence in the Quran speak to their sons and to their fathers, it's always with respect. When was the last time you went to your dad, oh my father, knowledge has come to me? No one does that. Baba badisiyara, like it's not, there's none of that. So if we have the respect from a base to work with, it's not hard to overcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Danny. You mentioned good cop, bad cop. Is that true? Do you guys really do that, or?
No.
No, you do. The next question is for you as well, brother. Can parents punish their children physically?
Oh, takbir. Okay.
From a point of law,
Yeah.
that's important.
Okay. From a point of law, there's a part in the law, in the criminal law, called lawful chastisement. Which means, and this is what I always quote to the fathers, I say, but in this country you can't this. You can use what they call lawful chastisement force, which means you can use no weapons, so no shahaita, no sticks, none of that, no lebo stuff. What you can do is use bare hand on areas that aren't sensitive, and subhanAllah, just like our Islamic principles, you can't hit the face. Right? So we can't cuff, no cuff.
That's where it all starts
I
from.
know, that's the problem. That's why you've got a posterior, right? That's what your rear is for. Smacking on the backside is full, and it's got to be something. In the law, it says relevant to age and maturity, because what does that mean? I can go slap my 35-year-old son? Some might, right? But for their age, it's got to be appropriate for their age. So yes, you can. So if you've got young children, put it this way: are you going to reason with a 1-year-old why they can't stick their fork in the electric socket? You're going to say, listen, let's talk about this. Doing this leads, and then explain electricity to him? No. So the snap on the hand and pulling it away, that's appropriate. But that to a 25-year-old probably won't work out for you. So it's got to be age appropriate, and the force has to be appropriate. You can't wound. So you can't, I was going to say whip, you can't whip anyway. You can't hit hard enough to leave injuries. And unfortunately, that's where we come in. And I spent 7 years specializing in this field, and the injuries I've seen are horrific, to the point of murder. So if you're a person, and this is again purely in line with Islamic principles, when you're angry, don't hit. You hit when you're controlled. If you're angry, don't touch.
So what are the parts that you could hit on?
You can hit. Are you listening? Yeah. I'm teaching him how to defend, but
shouldn't have brought the kids.
you can hit the limbs, so you can hit the hands, and you can hit the legs, and you can hit the backside. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, but without a wound.
No wound and no weapons. Nothing. Not using anything.
Just if we can add to that, maybe an answer from one of them share. Islamically, what age can you punish your son or daughter physically?
Sheikh Aref.
تفضل شيخ.
Yeah, that's
Who's the next person? Is it?
Sheikh Shady nominated you, so
it's a good
Kind of
one,
right.
that one, yeah.
I think the first point here that should be mentioned is that hitting in Islam is not the first result. It's the last result. The problem with the parents these days is that they use hitting as the first result. If you go through the life of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, 3 minutes, yeah? You will find probably 1 or 2 incidents where he just grabbed someone's ears. So therefore, what parents do not understand from Islamic perspective is that hitting is not the first thing that you use. Hitting is a necessity that you use when everything else does not work. And some people may see this idea as foreign to our culture. This, when you do a bit of homework, research about it, you find the ulama spoke about this from the time of the tabi'een, from the early scholars of fiqh. They speak about this. One of the first things they mention is that the use of the force is not for the sake of revenge or punishment. It is for the sake of discipline. Therefore, if I were to translate the hadith of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam about, and they say, in relation to the salah, I would not translate it as hitting, because today in the minds of the Arabs, hitting is when you knock someone out. You grab him and you slap him, and that's hitting. But the concept of the hitting, even in Islam, even in relation to how the had of zina is carried out, is different than any type of whipping or punishment that you've seen on movies. This concept, we have to understand it. It's not a non-Muslim concept, it is actually spoken about it. Imam Suhanun from the Malikiyya spoke about it. Imam Kasani from the Hanaf spoke about it. Imam Al-Ghazali spoke about it. Ibn Khaldun spoke about it. Many of the scholars spoke about hitting is not something that you use as the first result, ever. And to add to what brother Danny has mentioned, and hitting in Islam is not allowed under the age of 10. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he said light punishment, تأديبا خفيفا, something light. Because the ulama, they say under the age between 7 and 10 is when you command, after 10. So 3 years of commanding. After 10, that's when this gets used. Before they said تأديبا خفيفا, some light disciplining, because they see the child as incapable of being held responsible for what he's actually doing. Of course, our minds, this doesn't exist. This doesn't exist. And there's cases, and I've seen in the Arab world, because I come from Lebanon, not only from the Muslims and the Christians. There are actually complete crimes. So therefore, under the age of 7, That concept of hitting, take out of your mind. You should be disciplining them, light disciplining, explaining, repeating. Okay, if you use it as the brother Danny has mentioned, a slap on the head. Between 7 and 10, that's when you become reinforcement. You reinforce. That's why the Rasul said, "Muru awladakum bis-salati wa abna'u sab'a." And I command them to pray at the age of 7. Then I have to pray. But why? They said between 7 and 10, 3 years of repetition, 3 years of reinforcement. Now, after 3 years, if you're doing it properly, and a child did not get it properly, then that's when some of the ulama, like Imam Al-Imbani speaks about, okay, and that's when you might use some type of force, and then he says you have to use gradual, depending on what is required. So you speak to them, okay, forcefully, grab the E, for example, and then the use of some the types of hitting that Brother Danny has mentioned, not the face. Okay, I'll explain more. Not the face, not the head, not the private parts, nowhere a place that can cause an injury. They mention sometimes the feet, okay, and the hands. You cannot hit ever more than 10. You cannot hit on the same place twice. Every hit has to be in a different place. There should be a time between each one of them, and that only be used if this is going to pay result. If it's not going to pay a result and you're just emptying your anger, Allah's going to ask you about this. And that's not what I said, that's what the ulama have said in relation to this. And there's other conditions, but that's in summary what should be kept in mind. So these bruises, these black eyes, broken ribs, and I know Brother Danny probably have seen, and I have seen, hitting children until they're paralyzed with sticks that are that thick. I know a mother that took out the eye of a child. Took out the eye of a child. A lot of parents hit out of anger. And as Brother Danny has said, you're not allowed to hit when you are angry. And you're not allowed to hit for the sake of intiqaman, for the sake of vengeance, or for the sake of uquba, or for the sake of punishment. You hit for the sake of discipline. And subhanAllah, that mercy you see in Islam, look at amongst the Muslims, Allahu musta'an, Allahu alam.
Shukran, Sheikh Aref. Inshallah, brothers and sisters, we know there's a lot of questions and it's limited time, so...
Sorry, I took a bit long.
No, it's fine, Sheikh. Forgive us if we don't get through them, but we'll try to answer them in the future, inshallah. This question is for Sheikh Shady. The brother or sister are asking, can we delay in having a child or children for any reason?
Okay, if parents or wife and husband and wife want to delay having children, that's their own discretion. It's up to them. They could delay it. There is means that Islam had allowed, which I don't need to go into it. And Islam does not enforce someone to have children. It's up to them, especially if both parties agree that they want to delay having children for a reason or another, even sometimes for no reason. It's their own discretion, as long as no one forces the other, as long as no one forces the other, and as long as it's not also done through unlawful means, through unlawful means. No.
Sheikh, this is from myself, but I hear some people saying, I don't want to have children or any more children because we can't afford it. We can't afford the life that we want.
Okay, with regards cannot afford, this is a wrong reason. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in the Quran Al-Kareem, that where a lot of parents decide not to have children because of poverty, then Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran Al-Kareem, Allah will sustain them. And you need to know that every child is born with his rizq. The rizq is not from you as a father and a mother, the rizq is from Allah. On the contrary, when a child comes into this world, Allah brings him into this world with His own recorded and decreed rizq. So He's a rizq to you, and He brings His own rizq. So Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that in the Quran Al-Kareem, where some parents are afraid to have a child due to poverty. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, He is the one that sustains you and sustains them. That's a wrong reason. But if someone doesn't want to have a child because of illness, sometimes a woman and many sisters speak to me and say to me, the doctor tells them they should not have a child because of illness. And if she has a child, there could be a severe danger upon her life or health and so on. And some people just can't be bothered. And that's the typical generation these days. No one can be bothered to have children, and no one wants to go through the process of the woman being pregnant and the father, always, helping the wife, and then through the kids and so on. And that's why you find that as time goes, there's less children, people are having less children. We Muslims still have more children than anyone else, but compared to this generation with the previous generation, we are probably 70% less than what they used to have in the past. And subhanAllah, that's something we always discuss amongst the Sheikh, that the previous generation, they used to take on a lot more responsibilities. You find the mother, you find the mother, she is the one that has about 5-6 children. She used to cook on her hand, she used to make bread on her hand, she used to wash with her hands, like all these things. Now, with all the technologies that you've got the microwave and the food comes to your house, and you've got the washing machine. All you have to do is hatta the machine will do that for you if you want. Put the detergent and the dryer and so on and so on. And you find that the woman can't even bother to have one child, And one of the I have to share this quickly, inshallah. One of the reasons that you find there is a lot of fallout in marriages is this: that the husband complains about the wife that she cannot take responsibility, especially after they had children. Or the wife complains about the husband, him not taking responsibility of being a husband. Wallahu alam.
This next question I've received, but I'm going to choose Brother Danny, inshallah, to answer it. It's an interesting one. I found this one interesting. It's saying that many non-Muslims ask, why should we marry to have children? They said that we can have children without marriage. So what's the difference between marriage, like having children through marriage, or having children through non-marriage?
Do you mean as in like adoption, foster care, or do you mean as in out of wedlock?
Out of wedlock. So in wedlock.
And you gave that to me. That's
yes,
good.
I want to give that to you.
What have you heard?
This person is looking for an answer to explain to their friends.
Right. See, these questions that we get, and the wonderful thing about being in an organisation that hardly has any Muslims is it's the best da'wah opportunity ever. One of my roles is to train police officers and other law enforcement in Islamic awareness. And I've been doing that for the past probably 7 years. And a few, alhamdulillah, have taken Shahid and Aslama. And we actually have the first Hajj police officer as well. But what's interesting is people like to ask you questions because they don't want to answer. They like to ask you questions because they want to try to make you contradict yourself and make you look like you don't know what you're talking about. With all these questions, in my personal point of view, I go back to the source. I want to know what they believe, because I can't play a game where you determine the rules. That's not a fair argument. So when you want to talk to me about a belief system I have for me to justify it, if you don't even believe in God, why am I wasting my time? Because in my point of view, and you regret you gave me this question now, in my point of view, if you want to talk to me about an Islamic ruling, I need to know whether you believe in God or not. And then if you believe in God, do you believe there's revelation? And there's so many steps towards, before I even answer a question on why Islam and basically all monotheistic religions encourage marriage as the family unit for children. If we look at it from a societal point of view, there's many issues to think about, because if we just throw the answer of, well, you need to have a husband and a wife, right, there needs to be a male and a female to be good parents to the child, they'll throw at you the homosexual argument. They'll throw at you foster carers. They'll throw at you the abortion debate. There's adoption debate. There's many things they can throw at you. So I wouldn't open that door to myself. So for me to look at anyone who wants to ask me a question, I need to know what they believe, and then I'll play on their rules. If it's about God and God exists, then we'll talk about revelation. We'll talk about where they came to it. But if it's an atheist and he doesn't believe in God, I'm going to talk to him about his rules, which would be evolution or the laws of logic or whatever it is, and that's the way I tailor my answer. So it's difficult to answer that question without having a proper debate with the person. Or it's a really good way of copying out of this question.
Okay, well, it's kind of a good answer, because what you're saying is just don't take the question on face value.
No.
First assess where they're coming from, like question. Yeah, all right, inshallah. The next question is for Sheikh Aref. It's a long question, so bear with me, Sheikh. Once you have been blessed with a child and cared for them until the age of 7, is it okay to send them to an Islamic country in fear that bringing them up here could make them stray? Are you still fulfilling your Islamic duty as a parent as they are away from you, given the situation, and you cannot be overseas with them? So someone's asking, can I send my child overseas because this is a toxic environment, but I can't be with them? Is that still Islamically valid and you're doing your duty as a parent?
Yeah. طيب. There's two parts here. The first part, the person is saying that I actually look after them until they reach the age of 7. So they're trying to say that I have nourished them as much as I can nourish them, but now I think there's a need for them to go overseas and out of fear that they're going to be led astray. This is built on the premise that everyone that is born here and grows up here is going to be led astray. طيب, is this correct? Jazakumullah khair. That's the first part. Second, is the world today not a global village that is open? I grew up in Lebanon and then I came here and then I went back there after a number of years, and I'll tell you, the neighborhood that I grew up in tens of years, probably 10 years ago, is nothing similar to the neighborhood that is today. Meaning, the world is changing everywhere, not only in Australia. So therefore, the assumption that if they go overseas, they're going to be good, that's not always accurate. I know a brother, I met him, subhanAllah, by the qadr of Allah, he said to me, I sent my child overseas with his uncles to grow up with them. He said he became a criminal there more than here. So I went back, I grabbed him and then I brought him back here. So this will depend on a number of factors. First of all, that premise is not correct. Assess yourself. You're going to have to assess the place to which you are sending that particular child. Who are they, these people that you are sending them to? You haven't explained that. Are they the grandparents? Or are they a boarding school? So therefore, it would depend on the specific details of your specific case. Personally, I would not send my child away from me. The responsibility of parenthood lies firstly on who? On the mother and on the father. And as much as people would love your child, whether you pay them or you don't pay them, I don't believe that anyone will care for the child as much as their parents will actually care for them. And what Sheikh Shady mentioned in the question about authority and friendship, and Brother Danny has mentioned, is a fact. The first role model for a child is his parents and no one else. No one else. So therefore, it is your direct responsibility. It is better that you take this task on board. You look after them, you nurture them, you study them, because no one can be more merciful than you. By the way, even in the event, sorry, take a bit long, that's the last word. Even in the event of a death, let's say a father dies, or both parents die, who is the person that is Islamically, legally permissible to take the children? It's always a female of kin, and it starts with the father's side, then the mother's side. So who are you sending your children to? This question does not say. Even if you are dead, Islamically, the custody can only go to a female that is related to this particular child in your absence. So who are you sending them to? That's something that needs to be clarified before a fatwa can be given for your particular context. Allahu a'lam. No.
This question, inshallah, is for Sheikh Shady. Says, I have a brother whose father is a drug addict. Must be, I know a brother whose father is a drug addict, and our mother has passed away. He's under the care of his grandmother. Now, if his father wants him to live with him, is this Islamically acceptable?
No. Obviously, that the children need to live with competent parents. And this is what they call, rushd or Rashid. Rashid means someone who's competent in dealing with matters. So if someone is incompetent in dealing with money, Islam says we enforce upon them something called hijz, which we take the money away from them and we make a guardian that looks after them. So if the parents are incompetent in taking care of their children, then the children will be taken away from them and then they'll be given to the next kin. Okay, now that goes back to the judge. He needs to look into the kin. He needs to assess who's the next king. Okay, maybe the grandmother, but maybe the grandmother, she's too old, she's too busy, this. So he looks into it, but at the end of the day, the children will be moved into the next competent kin. And unfortunately, we have that a lot. Once I think you told me, I remember Brother Danny told me, walking into a house, into a villa with baby baby crawling on the ground with syringes, Allahu Akbar, and the mum, she's off her head and the father's off his head. Like, subhanallah, what kind of a life is that? And then these kids grow up and then the parents start complaining, oh, my children are becoming a drug addict. But you're a drug addict yourself. Oh, my kids are doing this, but you did that yourself. So subhanallah, like in Islam, if there is incompetence, now see, Islam is a comprehensive religion. First of all, Islam will fight drugs. So it will be very hard to find a drug addict if there's a proper, Islamic law and system. Even Australia, but Islam is a bit more harsher on this issue, Like, it's not like they allow drugs. But in Islam, if you take drugs or you deal with drugs, Allah Alam, you're probably never not gonna breathe again. So Islam is a very comprehensive religion, and if there is a child that's living amongst incompetent parents, such as junkies or drug addicts, then that child will be taken away from them, and then they'll be given to the next competent kin. And what we call competency here is someone who is good, pious, righteous. He's got at least wisdom, understanding of dealing with those children. Even in Islam, if the father is too aggressive with his kids, that also could be something that could be brought up into the court. And some fathers, subhanallah, we know that they let all the anger on their children, they bash them to the extent they'll kill them on one stage. This fear here. Maybe something I'd like to hear Brother Danny from his experience, because one of the things that really shocked me when he told me some of those experiences that he experienced walking into some of the houses, and the little baby, 1 or 2 year old baby, walking, just nearly avoiding syringes and that.
Thank you, Sheikh. Look, it brings me to another role I play. And I'm with an organization called Mission of Hope. And we have a number of strategies that are not advertised, they're not fundraisable as orphans in Syria and blankets and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, we've had a war on our streets for a long time. We've had war with drugs, poverty, prostitution, gangs, as long as I can remember. And a couple of years ago, when I joined the great team at Mission of Hope, we decided to focus and specialize even further on the street. What you don't know is we've got Muslim girls that are prostitutes. We've got Muslim girls reporting on bail for shoplifting, and they put the stuff in the hijab and in the abi, and that's why they wear the niqab. The stuff I see will baffle you. And we've got 13, 14-year-old Muslim sisters who are addicted to ice. And where are you going to get the money for the rehab? Do you think this is stuff we'll go and make a dinner at the Renaissance and raise money to pay for rehab of our brothers and sisters? No, you're not going to see that. But I'm telling you publicly, this is what we do. The stuff that we've been doing behind the scenes with amazing people, including people from the UMA, has been to use the funds we have to pay for rehabilitation where families can't afford it. And if the father is a drug addict and the mother's a drug addict, the money's not going to be too good in the family. But even these parents, regardless of what they're on, still don't want their kids to follow in their footsteps. And they come to us and they say, look, don't worry about us, but please get my daughter off it. I can't afford the rehab. I can't afford this. And this is what we do. Some of you may have heard of a strategy called Hayat House. and some of the brothers are here today. Hayat House has two sides. One of them is outreach. They go out on the street and talk to these kids. But the other side is clinical, Muslim-specific drug rehabilitation and addiction rehabilitation. There's nothing like this in Australia. We're the only ones that focus on Islamic principles to get our brothers and sisters clean, men and women, and their parents. These are things that the questions that you asked is an important question. We can't put our head in the sand about what's happening in our community. What do you do when there's a 14-year-old sister you know who's working in a brothel and that's how she looks after herself? What do you do when she's got an illness and she's got a disease that needs thousands of dollars to treat? Who are they supposed to turn to? So what I ask is we need to start looking, like it's amicable what we do for overseas, but what's happening here, that's going to touch you. It's not if, it'll touch you. Whether it's someone you know, whether it's in your family, or whether you're the victim of the crime because the criminal is the addict. This is coming on our footsteps. Overseas is not going to help us with this. This is something we have to answer for ourselves. So I'm appreciative of the opportunity, and I ask you to think about who's protecting our kids. And we need to divert some kind of effort onto that as well, because they are the forgotten elements of our community, and we have these issues, and they're bad. And if you don't believe me, come to the PCYC on a Thursday night at Bankstown, and you'll see the line waiting for us to come and talk to us. It's that prolific. So let's inshallah get together, and as much as we've done great things for overseas, let's try to save our kids as well.
Takbir! Sheikh and Brother Miqati. Now, this question, inshallah, is to Sheikh Aref, and it's now changing now the agenda to schooling, bismillah. So, with your background, subhanAllah, on the academic side, and here the question is asking, are Islamic schools necessary if our children are happy in public schools? That's a loaded question.
That's not a religious question. The problem with this issue, it's a bit difficult because I do have a personal, probably a personal opinion here, but I'm not gonna. But it's more of a personal preference, so I will not mention it. Are Islamic schools necessary if our children are happy in public school? The question is not about whether the child is happy or not. The question is about whether the child needs that shift or doesn't need that particular shift. And that's why a lot of the questions that sometimes you pose, I assess them, and I'm sorry sometimes I criticize them because I really want you to benefit from them. And that's why I mentioned things, the verdicts are actually related to the Australian context. You should not be looking for general situations, general questions. You should be looking for questions that relate to your particular context, because that's actually what will help you. Even the ulama, when they talk about the nature of children, they're not all the same. Some children that are more inclined to being good, for example, where other children are more inclined to be rebellious. So you can never set one model that is applied to everyone. So in answer to your question, you should really be assessing your child. What kind of child do you have? What kind of education do you provide at home? Are you able to satisfy or provide to that child the religious education that he needs at home? And therefore there's no need for the actual Islamic school? Then if that's the case, then Islamic school is not something that is a must for you. But if you are the type that is not able to provide that, and you're just looking for what is more convenient, then the answer is no, you should send him to an Islamic school. So it will depend on the type of child that you have. It will depend on your academic background as well, and will depend on how much you can provide to that particular child. Personally, I've always, I want to have fights with Islamic schools, but personally I've always thought that a private shura and a focused program for a child can be much more beneficial than a general education. In Lebanon, we had to memorize as part of our public studies. We had to memorize some parts of the Quran, But what personally I achieved with a sheikh over 3 months is actually more than I achieved with a sheikh in the school over 2 years. What is the difference? Is the focus of the actual education. So therefore it will depend on how your child is, it will depend on what you can provide to that particular child, and therefore you'll decide. If that's the case, then yes, you go for an Islamic school. If you feel that you don't need that, and you can provide more, you can have even a better program, then in that particular situation, no, wallahu alam.
Shukran, Sheikh. And it seems like a lot of the answers, a recurring theme is that you have to analyze your situation, analyze your children properly, assess what they need, and then you come up with the right answer.
Yep.
This one is.
That's why you have to understand your children. A lot of people with parenting, then your children are your gems. Assess every child, and subhanAllah, what I find very unique to the humans is that you can work out the personality of a child from a young age. Therefore, you cannot always use one strategy with all the children at the same time. You have to set one for every single child individually. Okay, this one is more rebellious, this one is more quiet. So this one needs a bit of leniency, this one needs a bit of firmness. And therefore, sort of like build a profile for every child that you have, and then nurture them and provide for them for what will lead to completing the personality and perfecting the personality. Very important, Allahu Alam. No.
Inshallah, I'm just going to take 2 more questions and then we'll wrap them up. Bismillah. This one is for Sheikh Shady. This person is saying they've heard many Muslim or religious teachers saying that only Quran is true knowledge for your children. Natural and social science is nothing. Is that statement correct, or can the science play a role, or does science is significant?
See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran Kareem, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. So it's true in one way, not true in another way. It's true that everything's in the Quran. Not true in the other way, that Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran Kareem, ask the people of specialty if you don't know. Allah says in the Quran Kareem more than once, ask the people of specialty if you don't know. So everything's in the Quran Kareem because of that verse, because Allah tells you, if there is a particular science that someone is specialized in, go and ask them. So if someone is specialized in parenting, someone specialized in psychology, someone specialized in engineering, someone specialized in medicine, Allah tells you, go and ask them. And Islam, and believe me, ikhwan, no religion endorses and focuses on the importance of knowledge as much as Islam. It's enough that it began with Iqra. But if there's a clash between science and Aqidah, which one overpowers or dominates? The Aqidah dominates. So if some scientist comes out and says, well, there's no existence of God, we say, no, hold on a sec. No, your science doesn't play with us, Put your science aside, because Allah says there's existence of Allah says there's existence of God. If a science says there's no existence of paradise and hellfire, that's where we say, okay, now there's a clash between science and the Aqidah. We say the Aqidah dominates. But if there is no clash between science and what Allah had mentioned in the Quran, or what we believe in, then we believe in that science. We take it. We take it and we believe in it, and there is no problems with that. And I believe that's a good question, inshallah.
Jazakallahu khairan, Sheikh Shady. The final question is for Brother Danny, but inshallah after Danny answers, if the Sheikh want to add anything, it's up to them. The question is, how do you encourage children to be honest and truthful?
That's a good question. When I work it out, I'll do it to my daughter. Look, again, I'm assuming we're talking about very young children here, or I hope so. The wonderful thing about children is the journey. Watching that journey of innocence is the beauty, one of the beauties of children. First and foremost, if it's honesty you want to teach, then embody honesty. You must be honest yourself. As the Sheikh has reiterated, we are the examples for these children. So if we're going to be teaching about honesty, then we need to be honest. And not honest, what I call sizzler honesty, where you pick what you want here to be honest about and then you lie about this. Because as the Sheikh has reiterated as well, the kids can see through the rubbish. At a young age, the wonderful thing about children is they love rewards. They absolutely love rewards. So instead of negative reinforcement, let's do positive reinforcement. So a child, when we reward the child with something that they like, they want to repeat that action. And I don't want to delve too much into cognitive behaviors because I'm not a psychologist. Don't let the mission of hope thing fool you. But in terms of what we see, there are some absolutely amazing children, and one of the shining examples I remember, it was a terrible case, but the thing that stuck out in my mind was this 2.5-year-old girl, and I won't say what the issue was, but she was able to give me a word for word recollection of an event that happened to her 3 or 4 months ago. And I put her in the car and drove her, and she showed me where it happened and everything. She was unbelievable. 2.5 years of age. And it was unheard of, and the prosecutors were arguing with me because we can't put a girl that age on the stand. And I said, I'll put her over any 10-year-old any day. She was absolutely brilliant, but when you spoke to the parents, you could see the way they spoke to her was always as a young adult. And she was disciplined and she had rules and regulations around her, but she loved her dolls. So what they would do for her when she wanted something, because they wanted her to come with me, and she didn't want to go because she was playing with the dolls. So the father said to her, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you this special doll. And this special doll is for people that help. And she's like, oh, okay, how do you do this? Well, you have to go with Danny in the car and then blah, 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 and then you get your doll. So I'm walking out the door and he tells me, where the hell am I going to find this doll? That's your call, not mine. So they went and did some extra colours on an existing doll and tried to change it around. When she came home, she busted them. She goes, that's my old doll. They coloured it in and put different things on it, but she knew what it was. So he had to put her in the car and drive to Toys R Us and get her a new doll. But we find with these kids, when you buy them a gift, sometimes all they want to do is play with the box. Like, you've spent this awesome gift, you saw it looks awesome, you turns it on, especially boys, and then they throw it, breaks into 100 pieces, and they go playing the same stupid game they were playing before. Even you rewarding them with playing with them is an amazing thing, especially the dad. I've come across this new game that I used to love as a child. Did anyone ever play Murder in the Dark as a kid? I decided to introduce that to my family a few weeks ago. And now before they go to bed, they'll look at the time, they know it's after Maghrib, and that's the time they have to sleep. So they're shifty now. As soon as that Maghrib is finished, they're like, okay, Dad, can we play Murder in the Dark now? So I'll ask them, have you done this, have you done that, have you done this? And at the moment, both my son and daughter are learning Quran. So I'll ask them to recite a certain thing. If they get it right, we'll play. If they don't get it right, well, then maybe we won't. But if they promise me tomorrow they're going to try harder, I'll play 1 game instead of 2. So if we play those little games with them, you don't have to buy them anything to reward them. Spend the time with them. Go back yourself what you enjoyed as a kid. Do you remember jumping on your dad's back when he was walking on all fours? Do you remember going fishing with dad? What did you love? Do you do that with your kids? See, what I found is if we start scheduling family time, we won't sacrifice the time instead. Because if you leave it, that when I've got spare time, I'll take them out, something will come up always. But if you know Sundays is my family day, that Sundays is your family day. Just like you'd never give up overtime at work on a Friday or whatever, don't give up family time. I won't take up any more of your time.
Would the Sheikh like to add anything, or leave the floor to you, Sheikh?
Well, mashallah, he answered it excellently. Probably one of the things, if you want your children to do something, then do it yourself. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, when he learned Qiyam from the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Rasul didn't wake him up for Qiyam. He was sleeping over his auntie's house, Maymuna. He noticed that the Rasul got up. He remembered everything that Rasul has done. And he was a child then. And then Rasul began to pray, and Ibn Abbas by himself came and stood next to him and prayed. So it begins with you as the role model. A second thing is explain to them the benefits of honesty. We notice that the Rasul ﷺ speaks to children. He doesn't assume they are dumb, they don't understand. The famous hadith that relates to Aqidah, يا غلام إني معلمك كلمات. A young boy, I'm teaching you valuable words in the hymn, احفظ الله يحفظك, preserve Allah, Allah will preserve you. And this long hadith, Ibn Abbas was a child when the Rasul taught him this. And addressed them with love and care. The Rasul will use Ya Bunay, oh my son, oh my dear son. He used it with Ibn Abbas, he used it with Anas, when he spoke to Anas, Ya Bunay, oh my son. If you can always make sure that at night and during the day, there's nothing in your heart of vengeance and ill will for any Muslim, then do so. For verily this is my sunnah, and whoever revived my sunnah, then he has revived me, and whoever revives me is with me. What did the Rasul do in the hadith? He addressed him nicely, he spoke to him directly, he explained to him the benefits of the action that he's going to do, and he gave him the reward that you're going to meet with me in the Jannah, on the day of judgment. Also, choose the time. When you speak to your children, the Rasul always will choose particular contexts. For example, Abdullah ibn Ja'far, the Rasul will entrust him with a secret. He will take him with him for a ride, and on the ride, they're riding with him, he will speak to them. So, therefore, act upon it, mention to them the benefits of it, choose the right time for doing so, and of course, the encouragement and the rewarding for them doing so is something that is very important as well. Jazakallah khair, had a beautiful answer. Allahu alam. Fadal Sheikh.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Aref and Brother Danny. I really enjoyed tonight, and it's been a pleasure to be amongst you two and amongst our brothers and sisters. And obviously there's no doubt that 1 hour and a half we did not fulfill the rights of this panel, and I would have hoped that we could go for longer, but it's not possible. Or also I'll fall asleep myself before you. Anyway, it's 10:30, and wallah, I know everyone is eager to stay here for longer, but inshallah we'll have more panels to discuss more of those issues. And all I could say, may Allah Azza wa Jalla protect our children and protect them and safeguard them and make them from the best of examples after He makes us the best of examples. And I personally have to say that I've learned and benefited from both Sheikh Aref and Brother Danny, and inshallah there's a lot for us to benefit from. So I ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to accept from us and to make us from amongst those who listen and hear and act upon what they listen and hear.